The morning fog draped itself over the swamp like a funeral cloth, thick and unmoving, muffling every sound except the slow drip of water and the occasional distant call of a heron. Beneath the twisted limbs of ancient cypress trees, a girl no older than 12 pressed her bare feet into the mud, moving with the silence of a hunted creature. Her skin, once warm bronze, was smeared in gray river clay. Her eyes, once curious and wide, now darted like a fawn's, skittish, alert, haunted. Her name was Asa, but even she hadn't said it aloud in weeks. She had once lived in a mound village, stone hearths, carved shells, tall wooden palisades, songs that rose with the sunrise. That world was smoke now. Raiders from across the river had come in the dark, when the moon was lowest and the people still dreaming. They weren't warriors from any known tribe. Faces painted with black ash, necklaces of teeth, eyes burning with something Asa didn't have words for. She had watched from a grain shed as they pulled her brother from the lodge, watched him scream until they slit his throat. Her mother had been the healer, taken first. Her father, the chief, had made his final stand with a broken spear. Asa had fled when the fire reached the trees. She had run until her legs gave out, then crawled, then waded into the swamp where the world softened and hid her. She had not spoken to another human being since that night, hadn't wanted to. People meant death. She lived now beneath the roots of a half-fallen willow, drinking rainwater from curled leaves and stealing eggs from nesting birds. Her body ached with hunger, but it was better than being caught. She ate grubs, bark, chewed reeds for moisture. Her ribs showed, her cheeks hollowed. But she was alive. On this morning, the fog clung low, and Asa was crouched behind a log, waiting for a squirrel to return to its hole. But the squirrel never came. Instead, there was a sound, a footstep. Not loud, not hurried, but deliberate. A twig snapped. Asa froze, heart hammering so loud she feared it might give her away. She slid backward into the mud, barely breathing. Then came a voice, deep, not young, not angry. It spoke low, with the weight of tired bones. "Child, you are not fog. I see you." Asa bolted upright, fists clenched, teeth bared. She was ready to fight with nothing but nails and desperation. But what she saw made her stop. An old man stood among the reeds, tall but slightly hunched. His hair was silver, braided down his back. His face was weathered like river stone, covered in lines of sun and sorrow. He wore robes stitched with river patterns, blue and brown, marked with the swirls of herbal wisdom. A gourd of water hung from his belt, and a carved staff rested in one hand, its head shaped like a turtle, symbol of the earth and healing. Asa didn't move. The man didn't come closer. He simply reached into his satchel, pulled out a small bundle wrapped in leaves, and placed it on the stump in front of him. "For you," he said. "If you want it." He turned and began walking away. Not fast, not afraid. Asa stared at the bundle for what felt like an eternity. Her stomach cramped. Her mouth filled with saliva. It could be a trick, poison, a trap, but it smelled like dried fish, like crushed berries, like something her mother used to make. She snatched the bundle and ran back to her hollow, tearing it open with shaking fingers. Inside, smoked meat, crushed corn cakes, herbs wrapped in bark. She devoured it, barely chewing, until her body heaved with both relief and guilt. The next morning, another bundle. No words, just the same man, setting it down and disappearing. On the third day, Asa followed, silent through the swamp, tracking his trail. He walked with the ease of someone who had lived long enough to fear nothing, greeting the trees, stopping to bless a dying frog, rubbing sap on a wounded oak. He led her to a hut built in the crook of 3 cypress trees, lifted off the ground by woven vines. Smoke curled from a small hole in the roof. A fire burned low inside. There were feathers hanging from the doorway, and herbs drying from every branch. He didn't look back, but said, "If you're going to follow, you might as well come sit." Asa stepped closer, one hand still curled in a fist. "I'm not staying," she said. You already are. She didn't answer, but she stepped through the doorway, and for the first time in moons, she felt warmth that didn't come from fire. The interior of the hut smelled of smoke, cedar, and crushed plants, an unfamiliar scent that clung to Asa's senses like a memory she didn't know she had. She stood just inside the threshold, body tense, eyes scanning everything. The floor was layered with woven mats, some frayed, others covered in symbols drawn with charcoal. Bundles of herbs hung from the ceiling, mint, yarrow, sage, and others she couldn't name. Animal skulls with painted markings rested on a low shelf beside a clay bowl filled with water that rippled slightly, though no breeze stirred the air. The old man sat by the fire pit in the center, adding a pinch of dried leaves to a small black pot. The flames glowed blue for a moment, then settled into orange again. He didn't look at her. You don't need to speak, but if you want to, you can. Asa remained silent, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. He glanced at her once, then reached for a gourd and poured a thick, greenish tea into a wooden bowl. Sit, drink. It will help you sleep through the night. She didn't trust it, or him, but her legs ached, her head was light, and the walls of the hut felt far less threatening than the swamp behind her. She took the bowl but didn't sit, sipped, bitter, earthy, but not foul. She drained it slowly, watching him the whole time. I'm not your daughter, she said quietly. I didn't say you were, he replied. Then why are you helping me? He stirred the pot again and exhaled through his nose like he'd been asked this many times before. Because once, long ago, someone helped me. That answer left her even more guarded. The fire crackled between them, throwing shadows against the thatched walls. She leaned against a post and let the warmth seep into her skin. Sleep came slower than she wanted, but deeper than she expected. When she woke, the man was gone. She bolted upright, heart racing, but then saw a plate of food near the fire. Roasted roots, small slices of fish, berries mashed in a leaf. Her hands trembled as she ate, watching the doorway. He returned at midday, dripping with sweat, a bundle of fresh-cut bark and twigs over one shoulder. He dropped it by the hut's side and sat with a groan. You're still here, he said, voice gruff. Didn't expect that. She didn't answer, but she didn't run either. That afternoon, he handed her a knife. Cut the soft part of this root, thin slices. She hesitated, then obeyed. The blade was sharp, and the root bled milky sap onto her fingers. Why? She asked. It draws infection out of wounds. Who taught you that? The woman who saved me, he said. Asa looked at him. Was she your wife? He shook his head. No, just someone who believed I deserved to live. That evening she sat outside the hut, legs dangling over a log as frogs sang around her. For the first time since the raid, she felt the hunger in her belly without panic. It was a hunger she knew would be answered. When night came, the man began singing low, an old Choctaw lullaby, words foreign but rhythm familiar. She didn't ask for more. She simply lay down near the fire and let the sound carry her. Days passed, then a week. She didn't mean to stay, but every time she thought of running, the swamp reminded her of what it had taken. The man, who finally told her his name was Ittalus, taught her things without forcing them. How to find certain moss that cleaned wounds, how to whistle to draw birds closer, how to listen to the trees, because they always whispered secrets before storms came. One morning, she found a deer caught in a trap not far from the hut. Its leg was twisted, blood pooling in the grass. She called Ittalus, and together they freed it, bound the wound, and let it limp away. Why not kill it? She asked. You said we need meat. He stared at the trail of blood. Because survival isn't the same as cruelty. That night, she dreamed of her mother's voice humming over a bowl of medicine, the way her fingers had traced symbols on Asa's cheek. She woke with tears on her face. Ittalus didn't ask why. He just handed her a piece of smoked fish and said, The rain will come today. We'll need to gather bark before then. Asa nodded. She didn't say thank you. Not yet, but her footsteps followed close behind his. Rain came in thick, slanting sheets that turned the swamp into a chorus of drumming leaves and hissing puddles. Asa and Ittalus moved under the protection of a wide cypress canopy, gathering bark and stripping herbs before the downpour soaked through their woven satchels. She had grown steadier with the knife, faster with her hands, and quieter in her movements. Ittalus didn't praise her, but his nods carried weight, his silence no longer heavy with doubt, but with respect. They returned to the hut soaked but unbothered, smoke curling through the dampness as Ittalus lit a fire with practiced patience. Asa sat across from him, drying strips of moss, her mind distant. "What did they look like?" she asked, voice barely audible over the crackle of the flames. Ittalus didn't raise his head. "Who?" "The ones who hurt your people, the ones you ran from." He placed a pot over the fire, the water inside trembling. "Their faces are buried. Time takes them. But I remember their smell, greed and fire." Asa nodded slowly. "Mine wore bones. On their faces, one had a string of ears." Her voice cracked. "My brother screamed like a deer caught in a snare. My father never screamed, not even when they cut him." She didn't look at Ittalus, afraid of what she might see in his eyes. But he didn't interrupt, didn't ask for more. When she finally met his gaze, she saw no pity, only reflection, like he was looking through her into something old and broken inside himself. "You remember it because it scarred you," he said. "But you survived it because something deeper chose to live." "I didn't choose anything. Not yet. But you will." That night, sleep didn't come. Asa lay awake, staring at the flickering shadows on the wall. Each movement outside made her flinch. Memories returned uninvited. Her brother's lifeless eyes, her mother's torn dress, the way the wind had carried smoke through the village like it was laughing. She sat up, wrapped in a deerskin, and stepped outside. The rain had stopped. Mist curled low over the ground, and the moon hung like a pale wound in the sky. She walked barefoot to the edge of the water, breathing deeply, as if trying to inhale something she'd lost. That's when she heard it. Low voices, distant but real. Not animals. Men. Her body locked in place, instincts screaming. She dropped to the ground and crawled toward the sound. Through the trees, barely visible, torchlight flickered. 3 men, strangers. One carried a musket. The other 2 wore fur and metal trinkets. Traders, maybe. Or worse. They were laughing, speaking in a mix of English and a dialect Asa didn't recognize. "We'll rest at the bluff," one said. "Healers still around here, they say. Old witch man. Might have roots worth selling." Asa's heart raced. She waited until their voices faded, then sprinted back to the hut. Ittalus was already awake, packing herbs into leather wraps. He didn't look surprised when she burst in. "They're coming," she gasped. "I heard them. 3 men, white and not. They're talking about you." He nodded slowly, calm. "I know. Saw their tracks this morning." "Why didn't you say anything?" she snapped. "Because fear would have made you run, and you're not ready." "They have guns." Her voice shook. "They could burn this whole place." "Then let them try," he said softly, turning to face her. "You've forgotten who I am, little river fox." He lifted his staff and tapped it once on the ground. A vibration rolled through the hut like a drumbeat. "They come for roots? Let them taste rot. They come for me? Let them meet the dead I healed and buried. And if they come for you..." His eyes hardened. "Then I become what I buried long ago." Asa stared at him, something unfamiliar sparking in her chest. Not safety, not fear, power. The next day passed slowly, every sound sharper, every shadow longer. Asa helped Ittalus set trip lines, hang drying moss in the smokehouse, and bury healing powders in carved gourds. She asked him nothing more, but her eyes never stopped scanning the tree line. That night, the torches returned. This time, closer. Asa and Ittalus waited in silence, crouched beside the fire with weapons ready, her holding a bone-handled knife, him holding a carved staff that pulsed with markings too old to name. The forest held its breath. And Asa, for the first time, felt something new inside her. Not just survival, not just fear, but a promise. If they came for her again, they would not find a girl in hiding. They would find something far more dangerous. The air before dawn was too still. Even the frogs had fallen silent. Asa crouched beside the fire pit, blade clenched in her palm, every muscle in her body stiff with waiting. Ittalus sat with his eyes closed, breathing slow, as if the coming threat was just another storm. But Asa could feel it. Something was shifting. It began with the crackle of underbrush and the soft grind of boots on wet soil. Then came the flicker of torchlight, bouncing through the trees like a serpent made of flame. 3 shadows emerged between the cypress trunks, their voices hushed but cocky. "This it?" one said, squinting toward the hut. "Don't look like much." The second man laughed. "Old man's supposed to know medicine. That kind of wisdom's worth silver back east." The third, the tallest, moved slowly, musket resting casually on his shoulder. "Don't matter what it looks like. We take the roots. Maybe the girl, too, if he's got one." Asa's fingers curled tighter around the bone knife. Her blood pulsed in her ears, and a rising tide of heat spread through her limbs. Not fear, not anymore, but fury. She glanced at Ittalus. He hadn't moved. "Now," he whispered. She sprang up before her thoughts could catch her, emerging from the shadows with a scream more beast than girl. The first man spun, startled, and tripped on a root as Asa launched at him. Her knife slashed low across his thigh. He howled and fell, torch flying into the reeds. Sparks danced along the wet grasses. The second man lunged at her, but Ittalus stepped between them, his staff raised. A burst of dust exploded from the carved turtle at its head, and the man staggered backward, eyes burning, choking as if he'd swallowed fire. The third man raised his musket, took aim. Asa dove behind the hut as the shot rang out, splintering wood inches from her head. She crawled through the ferns, her chest heaving, the knife still gripped in her hand. The wounded man was dragging himself toward the water. She caught up to him quickly. "Please," he gasped, hands raised. Asa paused, blade hovering. She saw fear in his eyes and something else. Weakness. The same weakness that had ended her brother, her father, her entire village. She didn't strike. Instead, she kicked his weapon into the water and left him there bleeding. Fire had caught in the reeds now, creeping toward the hut. Asa shouted, "The fire!" Ittalus didn't panic. He knelt beside the third man, who had passed out cold, and tied his wrists with reed fiber. "Water's behind the smokehouse," he called. "Bring the gourds." Asa obeyed, running with instinct, dumping water over the edge of the hut where sparks had begun to lick the roof. She moved fast, determined. For every flame that rose, she crushed it. When it was done, the swamp hissed with smoke and rain and the breath of 3 defeated men groaning in the dirt. Asa stood soaked and shaking but upright, alive. Ittalus walked over, checked her arms, her legs, her face. "Nothing broken?" She shook her head. "Only my fear." He smiled, then knelt beside the groaning man with the musket. "You came here thinking you could take what you wanted. This land doesn't belong to you, nor do we." The man spit blood and muttered something unintelligible. "Tell whoever sent you," Ittalus said. "We are not prey, not anymore." He stood and turned to Asa. "Do we leave them?" Asa looked at the wounded one, the blind one, and the unconscious one. Her hand still trembled slightly on the knife's hilt. "Let the swamp decide," she said. Ittalus raised a brow, but nodded. They left the men tied and broken, lying in the reeds with their torches drowned and their weapons scattered. Back at the hut, Asa collapsed onto the mat and stared up at the thatched ceiling. Her breath still came hard. Her heart still raced. "You were brave," Ittalus said. "I was angry," she replied. "Same root," he murmured, tending to a cut on his arm. She closed her eyes and saw her mother's smile, her father's hands guiding hers around a spear shaft, her brother's laughter chasing frogs through the river banks. She had run so far to escape the pain, the loss, the unbearable silence. But now, after tonight, she realized something deeper. She wasn't just running anymore. She was returning, not to her village, not to her past, but to herself. The morning after the attack, the swamp hung thick with mist and the smell of scorched reeds. Asa rose from her mat slowly, every muscle aching from the night before. She stepped outside, blinking into the pale, shifting light. The ground around the hut bore the scars of the struggle: broken branches, trampled ferns, muddy footprints leading away where the intruders had fled or been dragged off by the swamp's will. Ittalus was already awake, sitting cross-legged beside a small fire he had rekindled, grinding herbs between two stones. Asa sat beside him wordlessly, watching the powder build in the hollowed-out stone bowl. After a while, she asked, "What happens now?" Ittalus didn't look up. "Now you choose." Asa frowned. "Choose what?" He wiped his hands clean on a strip of cloth and finally met her eyes. "You survived the worst night of your life twice now. First when your village burned. Then last night, when you stood and fought. You are not the girl who ran through the swamp anymore. You are something more. But survival is not enough. You must decide who you want to be." Asa stared into the flames. Who did she want to be? A child who hid in the roots of trees? A girl who slashed at invaders but felt the burn of shame afterward? A shadow, living in fear of every stranger's footstep? Her hands curled into fists. "No, not anymore. I want to fight," she said quietly. "I want to protect, like my father did, like my mother would have." Ittalus gave a slow, approving nod. "Then you must be bound to something greater than yourself. Not revenge, not hatred, but a promise." He rose and walked to the back of the hut, rummaging through a pile of hides and satchels. When he returned, he held a small clay jar marked with swirling patterns. He drew a thin blade from his belt and handed it to her, handle first. "Prick your palm," he said. "Let the blood fall into the fire." Asa hesitated, the knife cold against her skin. "Will it hurt?" she asked. "Only if you fight it," he replied. She took a breath, steeling herself, then pressed the blade gently into her palm. Blood welled up, bright and alive. She held her hand over the flames and let the drops fall, sizzling as they touched the embers. Ittalus opened the jar, scooped a thick black paste with his finger, and began to draw symbols across her arms and forehead. Spirals, rivers, trees, the signs of growth and endurance dot. The paste was cool and heavy, the scent of ashes and flowers filling the air. Asa knelt before him, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her bones. "Speak your oath," he said. Her voice trembled but grew stronger with every word. "I will not run from the darkness. I will carry the memory of my people. I will stand between the lost and the hunted. I will become the storm they fear." The swamp seemed to lean closer, the trees creaking, the wind stirring the hanging moss as if they had heard and approved. Ittalus touched her shoulder. "You are not alone now." For the rest of the day, they prepared. Ittalus showed her how to weave stronger traps from sinew and branches, how to use sap and spider silk to bind wounds tighter than leather cords. They sharpened blades, crushed berries into pigments for marking trails, carved whistles from river reeds that could signal danger across long distances. Asa learned quickly, her hands steady, her mind sharper than it had ever been. But it wasn't just skill she was building. It was something deeper, faith in herself. As night fell, they sat by the fire again, eating dried fish and roasted tubers. Asa glanced at Ittalus. "Why do you help me?" she asked, the question spilling out before she could stop it. He stared into the flames for a long time before answering. "Because once, long ago, I was a boy like you. My village burned too. I ran too. An old healer found me, took me in, taught me to choose life over death. I failed him once. I chose hatred instead of healing. It cost me everything." His voice grew thick with old sorrow. "Helping you, it's the only thing I can still do, right?" Asa didn't know what to say, so she simply reached out and placed her hand over his. the blood-marked palm still faintly stinging but alive. He squeezed her hand once, gently. No more words were needed. That night, when Asa lay down to sleep, the fear was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't a wild, gnawing thing in her gut. It was a companion, a reminder of everything she had survived and everything she still could become. She closed her eyes and let the swamp's chorus of night sounds wash over her, stronger than she had ever been. The days that followed blurred into rhythm, waking before dawn, gathering herbs, checking snares, practicing blade work beneath the filtered sun. Asa moved with purpose now. Her feet were firmer on the earth, her breath calmer in the face of each unfamiliar sound. Ittalus rarely praised her, but she could feel his approval in the way he handed her more difficult tasks, trusted her to venture farther into the swamp alone. It was on one of those ventures that she found the tracks. They were faint at first, indentations in the moss where none should be, a snapped twig angled unnaturally, the scent of tobacco hanging in air thick with green. Asa knelt and pressed her fingers into the print. Too large for hers, booted, 3, maybe 4 people, and fresh. She turned and ran back to the hut, heart pounding. Ittalus met her at the threshold. "You felt it too?" he said. She nodded. "They're close." He handed her the staff, the one with the carved turtle at the top, and said, "Come, we don't wait for trouble anymore. We shape it." They followed the trail north, deeper into a part of the swamp Asa had never dared enter alone. Here, the trees grew taller and older, draped in curtains of moss like aging warriors in ceremonial robes. The air was thicker, the light dimmer. It felt sacred, like a place that whispered warnings with every step. Asa's grip on the staff tightened. Eventually, the trail led to a clearing where a tree had fallen, its roots torn from the earth like a wound. Beneath the arch of broken branches stood a man, not one of the raiders. He wore the skins of the north, braided cords across his chest, and a necklace made from polished bone. His face was weathered, but not cruel. Behind him stood 2 others, a younger man with a curved bow, and a girl, maybe 16, whose eyes locked instantly on Asa. Ittalus raised his hand, palm open. "We are not here to fight." The older man didn't move. "But you are armed." "As are you." A long silence stretched between them. Then the older man spoke. "You are the swamp healer. We've heard of you." Ittalus nodded. "And you?" "Tamaqui," the man said. "We come from a village burned 2 winters ago by men with painted faces and fire-breathing sticks. We followed whispers that there was safety here." Asa's breath caught. Her story, spoken back to her in someone else's voice. Ittalus stepped forward. "You are welcome to shelter by our fire, but know this: we do not tolerate greed, cruelty, or hidden knives." Tamaqui lowered his bow. "We carry none of those." As the sun began to lower behind the tangled canopy, the 2 groups returned together to the hut. Asa walked beside the girl in silence for a while. Her name was Saheli. Her stride was confident, her eyes sharp, but her hands trembled when they brushed against her dress. She had known fear, deeply. That night by the fire, Saheli sat close to Asa and whispered, "Do the nightmares ever stop?" Asa didn't answer right away. She stared into the flames, thinking of her dreams, some filled with blood and fire, others with her mother's voice fading into smoke. "They change," she said. "They don't stop, but you learn to walk through them." Saheli nodded, silent tears shining in her eyes. The days after that brought new motion to their lives. With Tamaqui's knowledge of the northern trails and Ittalus's herbs, the group became stronger. They built smoke trenches to hide their scent from predators, taught each other songs for protection, and shared stories not as sorrowful memories, but as threads in a woven future. Asa sparred with a younger man, Kiva, who was quick with his bow but slower on his feet. She beat him twice with the staff, and he laughed instead of frowning. It felt like the sun had risen in a part of her that had long been frozen. But peace, Asa knew, was not a thing given freely. It had to be protected. One morning, a hawk feather lay across the path leading away from the hut. Asa froze when she saw it. No bird had dropped it. It had been placed there, deliberately, carefully. A message. She took it to Ittalus, who examined it in silence. "This is not a threat," he said, "but it's a sign. Someone is watching us, maybe more than one." Asa's fingers brushed the edge of the feather, its barb smooth and sharp at once. "Do we run?" He shook his head. "We watch back." That night Asa did not sleep. She sat outside the hut, Saheli beside her, and together they stared into the dark beyond the trees, where shadows whispered and fireflies blinked like warning beacons. The nights turned colder, pressing silence into every leaf and shadow. Asa sat still by the fire, the staff resting across her knees, its carved turtle glinting in the amber light. Saheli sat beside her, chin tucked into her knees, both girls watching the trees as if the branches themselves might shift into threats. Ittalus and Tamaqui took turns patrolling the perimeter, moving without sound, checking the snares not just for animals but signs of human disturbance. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. The feather had changed everything. Something was near, something that wasn't ready to strike, but wasn't ready to leave either. "You ever seen anyone use a hawk feather like that?" Asa asked quietly. Saheli shook her head. "My grandmother used to say feathers carry memory, that some people use them to mark what they watch, to leave part of their spirit behind. So we're being marked, or warned." The thought gnawed at Asa's gut. She had faced men with blades, men with fire, even death itself. But the unseen watcher, the waiting silence, was harder to face. That night, Ittalus brought out something she hadn't seen before, a bundle of hollow reeds capped at the ends and painted with symbols. He knelt in the center of the clearing and pushed each one into the earth in a wide circle, whispering words she couldn't understand. Saheli leaned toward Asa. "What's he doing?" "Calling the smoke spirits," Asa whispered. "He told me once they're drawn to scent and silence. They see what we miss." When Ittalus finished, he lit a fire inside the circle and threw crushed herbs onto the coals. The smoke rose straight into the air, then curved, twisted, turned to the left. Asa and Saheli followed its direction with their eyes, straight into the woods. Asa rose and grabbed her staff. "We go together," Ittalus said firmly. "No one alone." They moved as one, Asa, Ittalus, Tamaqui, Kiva, and Saheli, through the trees, following the way the smoke had leaned. The forest swallowed their footsteps, their breaths barely stirring the ferns. The moon peeked through branches just enough to cast moving shadows on the ground, flickering like spirits slipping between worlds. Asa's grip on the staff tightened as she caught something. A glint. Metal? No. Eyes. Human eyes, low to the ground, watching. She raised the staff and froze. The others saw it too. A figure crouched between the roots of an old oak. Small. Still. Not a man. A boy. Maybe 10, face covered in soot, cheeks streaked with tears, arms wrapped around a burlap bundle. Behind him, another figure stepped forward. A woman, thin as a ghost, but standing tall, her eyes hard. She wore buckskin torn at the shoulders, a necklace of river shells around her neck. In one hand she held a knife, not raised, just ready. "We're not here to harm you," Ittalus said softly, hands raised. The woman didn't respond. Asa took a step forward. "You left the feather?" Still no answer. The boy whimpered, hiding his face in the bundle. Finally, the woman spoke. "You have fire, food, medicine." "We do. We have nothing. We had family. Now we have woods and ghosts." Asa saw it then, the woman's hands shaking, not from fear, from hunger, from exhaustion. She turned to Ittalus. "Let me give them something." Ittalus nodded. Asa pulled a pouch of dried fish from her satchel, approached slowly, and set it on a stone between them. "You can stay near us. You don't have to speak, just rest." The woman watched her a long time before finally kneeling. The boy tore into the fish like a starving cub. That night the strangers sat at the edge of the firelight. They didn't speak much, but they didn't run either. Saheli whispered, She was testing us, the feather, watching how we'd react. Asa nodded. I'd have done the same. In the following days, the woman, who eventually gave her name as Nima, helped repair traps and showed Asa how to use river clay to hide scent. Her son, Nico, never said much, but followed Asa everywhere, mimicking her every motion. At first, she found it annoying. Then, slowly, endearing. When Kiva tried to sneak up on Asa during a sparring drill, Nico tripped him with a stick and cackled. It was the first time Asa had heard a child laugh in moons. But peace was never whole. One night, Nima stood at the edge of the camp, staring into the trees. He followed me, she said to Ittalus. One of the ones who burned our home. I saw his tracks in the mud. He's watching, hunting. Asa stood beside her. Then we stop hiding. We end this. Nima looked at her, expression unreadable. You say that like you're ready to kill. Asa didn't blink. I'm ready to protect. The sky turned gray at dawn, the kind of gray that warns of more than rain. Asa stood at the edge of the camp, watching the swamp breathe mist across the still water. Her staff was in her hand, her knife tucked into the folds of her belt. Behind her, the others stirred in silence. No morning laughter, no idle talk. They all knew something was coming. Nima had not slept. She stood like stone near the fire, one hand on Nico's shoulder, her eyes never leaving the trees. Ittalus had marked the perimeter with ash and herb lines, circles meant to confuse and deter, but even he looked more tired than usual, the lines around his eyes carved deeper. Tamakwi and Kiva had sharpened every blade in camp. Even Saheli, usually quiet and soft-eyed, wore her hunting spear strapped across her back. How do we know when it's time? Asa asked Ittalus. When you stop asking, he replied. Midday came with heat and a stillness that made every breath feel stolen. Then a bird screamed. Not an ordinary call, sharp, high, wrong. A warning. Asa didn't hesitate. She grabbed Nico and pushed him behind a fallen log, whispering for him to stay low and silent. She ran to the edge of the trees just in time to see the movement. Two men, both wearing hunting leathers, faces painted with charcoal and ochre. One carried a musket. The other, a long knife with a jagged edge. They were not scouts. They were predators. Asa ducked behind a thick tree trunk, waiting for Ittalus's signal. A low bird whistle sounded. Twice. Then silence. The hunt had begun. Asa moved like water, weaving between trees, staying low, circling wide. She spotted the musket carrier approaching the hut and flanked him. He was focused forward, unaware. She waited until his boot hit the ash circle. He paused, confused. She struck. Her staff swung hard, cracking against his ribs. He gasped, staggered, raised the musket. But she was already behind him, knocking it free with a second blow. He fell, cursing. Asa pressed the staff to his throat. Don't move! But she didn't finish him. She never had. She waited for Ittalus. A scream rang from the east side of the camp. Saheli. Asa turned and ran. The knife wielder had reached the clearing, slashing at Kiva, who blocked with his bow. Saheli lunged with her spear, grazing the man's side. He roared, turning on her. Asa leapt, staff first. It cracked against his shoulder, staggering him long enough for Tamakwi to tackle him from behind. Together, they brought him down. Blood splattered the ferns. The man thrashed and spat until Ittalus stepped forward and blew a handful of ground bark into his face. The man coughed, blinked, then slumped unconscious. Asa stood over him, breath heavy, chest tight. Her arms trembled not with fear, but with fury. How many more are there? She asked Nima. Nima stepped into the clearing, dragging the musket from the first man. Just one more, the worst one, their leader. His name is Breck. Ittalus's expression darkened. I know that name. He raided a Choctaw settlement 10 winters ago, took women, burned children. He disappeared before anyone could bring justice. Asa looked at the blood pooling beneath the fallen knife man. He's not disappearing this time. That night they tied the captured raiders to trees at the camp's edge. Ittalus questioned them softly, persistently, until one of them spoke. "He's coming. Before the moon is full. He wants the woman. Said she belongs to him." Nima didn't speak for a long time. When she did, it was with venom. "He killed my husband in front of my son, took our food, burned our home. I escaped while he slept." Asa stared at the fire. "Then we don't run, we wait, and when he comes, we finish it." Ittalus placed a hand on her shoulder. "This will not be like before. Breck is no ordinary raider. He plans, he hunts, he kills with words before weapons." "Then we kill him with silence," Isa replied. "Let the swamp speak for us." They prepared all night, digging shallow pits lined with sharpened stakes, stringing tripwires from root to root, setting traps laced with powdered root that would burn like fire if stepped in. Asa carved marks into trees that only their group could read, signals of danger, escape, regroup points. The moon rose thin and cruel. Asa couldn't sleep. She sat alone at the water's edge, watching frogs leap between lily pads, her reflection staring back with new eyes. Stronger, sharper. Breck would come. But this time, she would not run. She would not watch the ones she loved be taken. She was no longer the orphan hiding in the mud. She was the storm in the reeds. The swamp held its breath. Even the wind seemed to curl inward, waiting. Asa stood at the center of the clearing, the staff gripped tight in her hand, its turtle carving worn smooth by days of sweat and storm. She had painted her face in charcoal and ochre, lines like rivers across her cheeks, symbols of memory, defense, and war. Around her, the others moved without speaking. Tamaqui checked the spike traps one last time. Kiva nestled himself in a nest of moss high up in a tree, bow ready, arrows laced with poison sap. Nima and Saheli tied sharpened reed stakes to the roots near the trail, hidden just beneath the water's surface. Ittalus sat by the fire, motionless but alert, eyes half-lidded in meditation. Nico clung to Saheli's leg, whispering songs his father had once sung. This time they wouldn't be caught off guard. Breck was coming. They could feel it, not just in the warnings from the captured raiders or the sudden disappearance of birds, but in their bones. Asa felt it like a storm behind her ribs. The traps were set, the signals memorized, the escape routes clear. All that remained was the waiting. Then, just as the moon split the clouds and bathed the swamp in silver, the sound came, branches snapping, deliberate steps, the distant crack of something metal against bark. Breck didn't sneak. He wanted them to know he was near. He wanted fear. Asa didn't flinch. She turned and gave the signal. 2 short whistles. Instantly, the fire was extinguished. Shadows swallowed the camp. In the darkness, they waited. Then he stepped into view. A tall man, broad-shouldered, bald, with a black coat of wolfskin over his back. A knife, the length of a forearm, hung from his belt. His eyes glinted with something inhuman, cold, calculated. He walked like a man who had never lost a fight. Behind him, 2 others followed. One held a torch, the other a chain. Asa's breath stilled. Breck stopped in the center of the clearing and scanned the dark, then smiled. "You can come out now. I've no interest in killing every one of you, just the woman and the girl. The rest can go free." Silence answered him. He chuckled. "Fine, have it your way." He raised a hand. "Burn it." The torchman stepped forward, but his foot sank. A crack, a cry, and then a scream. The man disappeared into a pit of spikes. Breck didn't flinch. "So it's going to be like that." He turned, just as Kiva's arrow sliced across his shoulder. Breck roared, spun, and charged toward the trees. Another trap triggered. Fire dust exploded into his face. He screamed, clawing at his eyes. Asa moved. She leapt from the shadows, staff spinning, and struck the second man with the chain across the knees. He collapsed. Saheli finished it with a spear to the chest. Only Breck remained. Blinded, raging, he stumbled into the center of the clearing. Asa stood before him, breath steady, heart pounding, every inch of her alive with memory. He swung wildly, knife flashing. She ducked, twisted, struck his ribs with the staff. He grunted, lashed again. A shallow cut opened across her arm. She didn't fall, didn't stop. This was not the fire that took her family. This was not the faceless terror of the past. This was flesh and blood and cruelty with a name. Breck. She struck again, once to the knee, once to the ribs, once to the temple. He staggered. She raised the staff and drove the turtle carving into his chest. He fell, gasping, eyes wide. Ittalus stepped forward, hand raised to stop her. Enough! Asa panted, blood dripping from her wound. He'll come back. Not from this. Ittalus knelt beside Breck and pressed a poultice to his mouth, herbs forcing his breath into slumber. He'll sleep until morning. Then the swamp will take him. He deserves worse, Nima spat. And he'll get it, but not from our hands. They bound him, gagged him, and left him beneath the tree where the ghosts of the swamp were strongest. When dawn came, Breck was gone. No blood, no footprints, only his chain left behind, rusted and curled like a serpent retreating into shadow. No one asked where he had gone. No one wanted to know. That morning, the camp was quiet, but not in fear, in relief. Kiva sang a song of survival. Nima braided Asa's hair for the first time. Ittalus offered no speech, only silence, and a rare smile. Isa stood at the edge of the water, watching the sun rise. Her blood had been spilled, but not wasted. Her fear had been faced, but not fed. She was no longer prey. She was protector. She had not only survived the last raid, she had ended it. The sun rose gentle and golden over the swamp, cutting through the mist in long fingers of light that shimmered across the water's surface. Birds returned to their branches, cautious at first, then singing as if the silence of fear had finally lifted. The traps were dismantled, the weapons sheathed, the ash circles swept away by the wind. But the memory of what had been done, what had been survived, remained in every heartbeat of the camp. Asa stood alone at the water's edge, barefoot in the cool mud, her arms crossed, her wounds freshly bandaged. The pain in her side throbbed like a heartbeat, but it grounded her. It reminded her that she had bled not as a victim, but as a defender. Behind her, Ittalus sat on the same log he always returned to after battle. He no longer looked like an old man, but like a tree that had weathered many storms. "You feel it?" he asked without looking up. Asa nodded. "It's different now." "Because you are different." "No," she said quietly. "Because I remember who I am." He smiled. "Good. Then it's time." Asa turned to him, eyes narrowing. "Time for what?" "To choose your path. Again, the battle is over, but your life is just beginning. You can stay here, rebuild this place into something sacred, something safe, or you can go to those still living in fear and give them the strength you've found." Asa looked around. Saheli and Kiva were boiling roots over the fire, laughing softly, their shoulders finally relaxed. Tamakwi was carving something on bark, while Nico played with a frog near the stream. Nima stood watch, not from fear now, but from habit, her gaze soft when it fell on her son. This place had become a home, a shelter, a tribe. "I don't want to leave them," Asa said. Ittalus stood slowly. "Then don't. But remember, protection is not always about staying. Sometimes it's about going, becoming the voice that calls the lost back to the fire." Asa stared at the staff leaning against the log, the one she had fought with, bled with. She took it in her hands and felt the weight of her past, her present, her future. That night they held a fire gathering, not to mourn, but to mark a beginning. Tamakwi sang songs of his people, voice deep and steady. Saheli painted symbols on bark and hung them from the trees like blessings. Kiva performed a mock duel with Nico, pretending to be wounded while the boy roared with laughter. Asa sat beside Ittalus as he lit a pipe and let the smoke curl upward into the night sky. "What will you do?" she asked. "I've taught all I can," he replied. "The rest is yours to give." She looked down at her hands, at the faint marks still left by the blood oath she had made. What happens when people don't want saving? Then you remind them they deserve it anyway. The fire crackled as the stars bled slowly into the sky, each one a quiet reminder of the spirits watching from beyond. Asa stood and raised her staff, the carved turtle catching the light of the flames. "I was born beneath the mounds of a people who are now ash. I ran from death, I hid from pain, but the swamp gave me back my breath. The fire gave me back my name, and this family," she gestured to the circle of faces around her, "gave me back my soul." No one clapped, no one needed to. The stillness was reverent, sacred. That night, while the others slept, Asa walked alone to the place where they had left Breck. She found nothing, no sign of his body, no trail, just the chain still coiled in the dirt. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands, then hurled it into the water. It sank with a quiet splash, swallowed by the same swamp that had once swallowed her fear. In the morning, she braided her hair with river grass and feathered cords. She packed only what she could carry: herbs, flint, a carving of the turtle given to her by Nico. The staff remained in her grip. Ittalus waited for her by the edge of the path leading north. "You sure?" he asked. "I am," she replied. "Then walk slow enough to be found. The ones who need you won't know they're looking until they see you." Asa kissed his cheek, hugged Nico tight, nodded to the others, and walked into the trees. Her steps were light but sure. The path ahead was unknown, but she was no longer afraid. Somewhere out there, another child hid in the mud. Another girl sat with fire in her heart and silence in her mouth, waiting for someone to remind her she was still alive. Asa would find her, because she had once been her, and now she was the one who lit the fire.